Welcome, Voltron fans. This is Marc Morrell, your host for Let's Voltron, the official Voltron podcast. We're here for our review of VoltCon 2022, and we have some guests with us. So I'm going to start off by introducing my co-host, Greg Tyler. Welcome, Greg.
Hey, Mark, it's great to be back with you. It's been a little while, and I'm glad to be back with you to chat about not an episode review, but a convention review. So this will be fun.
Yes, and we were excited because since I couldn't be there, another person who was filling in could be there, and that's Shannon Muir. Welcome, Shannon.
Thank you again, and thank you for letting me fill in for you. It was a great experience, but at the same time, wish you'd been there in person.
Yes, it was a shame that I had to miss it, but it was an important reason why I had to miss it. But I'm glad you guys could be there. I'm glad there were plenty of people there that you could give the panels to. And there's another guest that we have on the podcast with us tonight that actually recorded all the panels.
It was all of our panels, not all of the panels for
Right.
the entire convention, but yeah.
Right. But yes, recorded all the panels that were run by the podcast. So we appreciate that. So welcome, Pete White.
Marc, Greg, Shannon, it's great to be on with you, and I was glad that I was able to pinch hit this year and record the videos, and I'm glad my iPhone battery and hard drive held out.
We are glad to. Thanks so much for doing that. And Shannon, thank you again for going up to bat for the podcast and contributing in a major way to VoltCon. So thank you.
Yes. So we're all here. The gang's all here. We're talking about VoltCon 2022. So I'd like to get a sense of what it was like for all of you guys. What happened? You know, what were some of the highlights for you guys? And just tell us in your own words. Who got there first?
I believe I got there Thursday night, and I got a good night's sleep. Went over and picked Shannon up in the morning from where she was, and then, you know, VoltCon is always like this great Voltron family reunion. So it's like everyone you run into in the lobby, and as the con is getting going, it's just like the greatest joy of seeing old friends that we've seen pretty much for the last 4 years now. And it was just, you know, a great time getting there and seeing everyone.
Great.
I was actually at another hotel literally across the street because, as I mentioned in the program, but I don't remember if it's come up on a past podcast, I've started going to graduate school online, and I knew I had to get all my homework done before VoltCon, and I knew a couple other people were showing up Thursday night too. And so I just sort of I decided to go somewhere else, so I knew that I could hunker down and get all that done, and it worked out. So after Pete brought me over, we immediately started meeting people, and it wasn't just people that we knew. There were some new folks who had been there for the first time. Pete, I think you actually were chatting with one person in particular when I was still checking in at the front desk. Do you remember who I'm talking about?
Yeah, I met a cosplayer named Tony from Texas, and I'm trying to remember the name of his cosplay page, but he does an amazing hunk from Voltron Legendary Defender and looks just like Hunk. And it's amazing. He had 2 costume changes. I've been following his page and just really love meeting new people as they come in. And, you know, if you watch the Shake-Ups video, he dances to I'm a Leg.
Costume was just amazing. It was great.
Cool.
Yeah, so after that, Pete and I went out. We had to, for our timing of different meals, went out, caught lunch more or less, depending on your time zone, lunch, early dinner, and then came back to the hotel. And that's when we kind of started running into everybody else. This kind of starts blurring for me because I remember talking to Eric and Amy and Marika and Elizabeth, and I don't think they were the only people that were there with us, Pete. I think there were a couple other people.
Yeah, no, I think, you know, some of the people I see from the Voltron Toys and Collectibles group on Facebook started popping in. Kyle and got to meet a few of the people I've never met before. Tim came in, and Brad, and Heath. But then, yeah, we ran into Marika, and we ran into, Marika, Mama Voltron, Tara, and that's when the family reunion starts, seeing Eric and Amy. And it's just, running into then Savannah and Patrick and Kevin and everyone. And, members of the Shakeups who also, double as con chairs.
So when did you get there, Greg?
After them, but I don't remember when. Yeah, I had a 2.5 hour drive, which is just a piece of cake compared to the drive that Pete had and the flight that Shannon had. Google Maps took me on these country roads like it did last year, and I had a blast driving through some small towns. I love getting stopped in a rural town by a train on a railroad crossing. It reminds me of when I was a kid, and I almost got stopped at 2 different railroad crossings by the same train as it zigzagged across the road. It was awesome.
Wow.
Yeah, and that was just on the way there. And then got to when I don't remember what time I got there, but very soon after I got there, met Pete and Shannon and many other people. I legit don't remember a whole lot. As we're recording this, it's about a month after VoltCon, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So memory's a little fuzzy. I also feel very guilty because we met several new people, and aside from the folks that Pete just mentioned, I am spacing on their names. And I did really well with their names throughout the weekend, but in the month that's passed since, hopefully they'll all be there next year. But there were many, many new faces, which was a great surprise. And we did wind up spending Friday evening most of the time at the con suite, right? It was like a VIP event. Is that right?
Yeah, that's where it wound up. There was a little bit of confusion because, as I understand it, they were supposed to have gotten a suite on the first floor, and due to some logistical reason, the con suite wound up on the 4th floor. And so and when I had run into Kevin, it was like, go get the food on the 4th floor and come back. I was one of the first ones he must have talked to. And then everybody had stayed up there. And then Greg had to come back down and find me to take me back upstairs. But we got everybody back up there, and I think everyone had a pretty good time.
Yeah, definitely. In the con suite is always great. They did desserts this year, so we got to enjoy that. And Eric Stocker gave us a sneak preview of his Die Rugger vehicle Voltron cosplay mask that he, full head mask that he did and raffled off at VoltCon 2022.
Wow.
And just, we all tried it on, and, I of course had to take a selfie with it. I didn't win, but at least I have the selfie with it. And he's just so good, talking to people. And I believe, think some of the guests arrived after I did. I went down to dinner with a few friends while some of you were still up there. And then we went back up, and I believe Bob Koppler and Steve Sterling and, some of the other people, guests were up there mingling, which is always nice if you get that VIP to help support the con, but you also get a little bit more access to, some of the people who are going to speak the next day early, like Greg and Shannon, who did amazing panels this year. And Marc, when you joined us, on Sunday.
Yeah, we'll get to Sunday in a minute. I just want to get a sense of what were some of the highlights for each of you for VoltCon. You give your overall highlights, and then we'll go through it chronologically then.
Right. I just thought of something involving the VIP suite and names. And this might be why you weren't thinking of it, Greg. One name we didn't bring up, because I can't remember precisely when he showed up on Friday, was Marc Oliver, that was good to see him there. But then there was the other gentleman that came and talked to you and Eric, and this is where I'm getting fuzzy. Was he also a Marc with a K, or was he Marcus, the one who had the
There was
daughter?
a person, that was Marky.
Marky,
that's Marky. Had a daughter who was there too. I remember several other people throughout the weekend meeting people that I had never seen at VoltCon, but yes, he was definitely one of them. And I tried deliberately to reach out to people who were new and tried to welcome them in because, a family reunion only gets bigger when when people reach out and say hi to new folks. And I think everyone was doing that, but I'm kind of an introvert, and so I'm like, step out of your shell, do it. And so I did. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. And I remember when Steve Sterling showed up in the con suite, Shannon and I were talking, is that Steve Sterling over there? I think it might be. And so we got to chat with him then, and he was there with his daughter. I guess she came in from somewhere else and they met there for VoltCon, and they were only there through Saturday, late Saturday, when I think each of them had to leave to go to go to wherever they were going next in their ventures. But it was neat to see them both there. And
Yeah, his daughter's name is Olivia, I think.
that's right. Yeah, so that was a blast. Um, so overall, what are some of the highlights that you all had?
Besides seeing, the people we don't see often, getting to interact and listen to um, someone like Steve Sterling, who was such an integral part of Defender of the Universe back in 1984, to share his insights, and for us being lucky enough, to meet Franklin Kofod, and then now we get to meet Steve Sterling and hear the behind the scenes things. I think one of my highlights from the interview you did with him, Greg, was hearing that he pulled in, they were joking that he had to listen to the stereo sound through speakers that would actually sound like the TVs people would be buying. They
Mhm.
had this like $1 million studio, and here Steve is bringing in like, small little stereo speakers. That was a
Right.
cool little tidbit for me to listen to, and to get that insider info.
He wanted to hear it from the end user's perspective, which is all the
Mm-hmm.
people that would have bought a stereo TV, and being able to have it come out the same way it would for them. And for some people that were in the sound team, they probably saw that as a little bit too much, and he just wanted to make sure it tested correctly. That's why some of the quality is as good as it is, probably.
Yeah, I loved that he, like Franklin Kofod, remembered his experiences making the show with amazing fidelity. I mean, I looking back over my own professional career, um, I don't think I'll be able to recall anything from over 3 decades ago with the clarity that both of them have had. And to hear that, the enthusiasm and pride, and I don't mean that in a hubris sort of way, but it was a very important highlight of their careers. And to hear Steve speak of that with the same passion that we had heard a few years back from Franklin is just amazing. And they worked on different episodes. Steve focused mostly on the Lion Force episodes, and Franklin mostly on the vehicle team episodes, but there was some crossover. And it was really interesting to hear they basically worked in silos
Mhm.
under the direction of Peter Keefe. And
Right.
it's really interesting to hear from both of them independently. It does make me wish all the more that we could have had a chance to talk with Peter Keefe.
Yeah, I don't know if you
Who
saw most recently on the Voltron official social media accounts, they had a snippet from a Peter Keefe interview where he mentioned the fact that Franklin Kofod and Steve Sterling had done nothing short of create miracles for that show because of all the
Mhm.
hard work they did. And I
Yeah.
remember Steve saying in his interview that sometimes they had worked like 14 days in a row or 18 days in a row, nonstop, and
Yeah,
just to get these things in time.
it's really amazing, absolutely amazing. And it was really great to hear, uh, just hear that enthusiasm from him, and the gratitude that he had to people who continue to admire the you know all the work that he put into it so many years after the fact. I mean, that was certainly a big highlight for me. I would say that overall, rather than a lot of specific incidents, instances of highlights for me. I just enjoyed seeing everyone again and seeing new people for the very first time. Seeing Kevin Clark's Castle of Lions, which now has an interior. I called him, I told him it was probably the greatest dollhouse ever made. Just such an amazing job with it. And I said that with genuine respect, because I remember when my mom would take my sister and me to different stores, I was always fascinated by like craft stores and stuff. I was always fascinated by doll houses because they were like, action figure play sets on steroids with all the details in them. And to see that kind of energy and passion that Kevin put into his Castle of Lions was really, really impressive. That was a lot of fun. But just overall, meeting everyone again was a blast.
How about you, Shannon?
Sure. First off, I definitely have to agree with the meeting everyone definitely under less overwhelmed circumstances. And I mean that in the sense that real quick, for those who don't know the story, my coming to VoltCon in 2021 basically came together in about 30 days notice.
Mm-hmm.
So to have a whole year to prep for it and to have think like where Marc and Greg, you weren't like the only people I were gonna know. It's like, oh, I remember I've met this person. I know I'm gonna see this person, and who else might I meet? That was great. I also have to say that listening to Steve talk was one of my personal highlights. Given so much that we knew about his career on paper, I did not expect animation to be his passion point. That was like a real surprise to me in a very good way. And when he told the story about being in his small town in Pennsylvania and he was told to go to LA or New York, and in his case, New York was what made sense because of where he was, and yet he creatively come up with this idea that he wanted to pitch and how that all went. I saw pieces of myself. I heard pieces of myself in my own story in the small Washington town, and I was told the same thing. But in that case, it was just strictly come to LA because the people I was communicating with as a teenager, Mark Handler, Christy Marks, were here in the LA area.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it was like, okay, down the coast. But everything was just about the same. And I'm like, wow, I can really relate to you. And I have absolute, I mean, I obviously have enjoyed the shows, but I walked away with an absolute respect for him as a person.
Oh yeah.
And I'm not going to forget that anytime soon.
Yeah. So I definitely look forward to us having Steve Sterling on the podcast. He has expressed interest in doing that, and
Great.
was honored by being asked. So I look forward to us getting together with him and making that happen. Another highlight was that a certain Mark Morrell was able to join the convention festivities on Sunday through the power of technology and the passion and audio video know-how of Ricky. They really went above and beyond and made that happen. So special kudos to Ricky for helping with that.
Yeah, that was the definite highlight for me.
Yeah.
Because I don't think we've had that done before at VoltCon, right?
I don't believe so.
Not
I
at
remember when
VoltCon.
No.
Ricky in fact emphasized when Ricky was talking to me during that first setup that this was something Ricky had not done very often because it was hard to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm glad we pulled it off. I mean, we knew what limitations we had to work with, which was why Mark wound up doing most of the talking for anybody who was there in person Sunday, because we knew the mic we had on stage, and it was obvious even if you've seen the video, caused a bit of reverb. So we tried to figure out how to interject. But besides which,
Mhm.
they'd seen us all Saturday, you know, talking. Like it was your turn.
Yeah, well, we had done a practice session in the morning, and there was a little bit of echo coming from those microphones, but you know, they limited it as much as they could. But yeah, I thought it turned out great considering everything. So
Yeah.
I was happy for it.
So Ricky, if you're watching this, thank you again. You did an
Thank
amazing
you.
job. And I also had a really good one-on-one conversation with Savannah for several minutes. It's just one of those quiet moments where you just happen to be sort of in an area of the room that isn't filled with people, and that was a great time because he's often up in the you know, like the registration desk and things like that, or up on stage with the shake up. So it was the first time really over these 4 conventions that I've had a chance to chat with her for a while, and that was a lot of fun. Patrick and Kevin, of course, are just a lot of fun to talk with, and the passion they bring is very evident, and their love for bringing people together. But it was my first chance to really chat with Savannah, which was a lot of fun. So, and then there was this little thing that happened where the people at WEP stole all of our cell phones, our smartphones,
Yeah,
and
I heard about
connected
this too.
devices. Yeah, that was a bit of a highlight. They did fortunately give those things back. But yeah, to lose those smartphones, that time, whatever happened there between when we lost our devices and when we got our devices back, that was kind of a big deal. What was that, guys? Do you
Did you
remember?
have to sign an NDA, or are you allowed to talk about it?
We didn't have to sign anything.
Okay.
No, we didn't.
No.
So if you didn't sign an NDA, but you weren't allowed to record it, does anybody know if it actually happened? It's like if a tree falls in the forest, does it make a sound? Did it really
That's a great
happen?
question. Actually, I don't even know what we can say. I mean, it was how would you summarize it without going too much into detail?
Well, this is one of those things where I'm just, and I think I'll get the title almost right word for word. The title of his panel was Voltron Past, Present, and Future. Let that speak for itself. The title is
Yeah.
true. And
Yeah.
since that was out there publicly, and past that, as somebody who deals too much with that kind of stuff in the entertainment world, I'm like, I don't know what I can't say, and I don't want to misstep.
Well, this is
That's-
another exceptional thing with VoltCon being a small con, right? Is the big cons, it used to be back in the day when they were a little bit smaller, if they had something that they showed to an audience at Comic-Con or say something like that, the audience at Comic-Con was the only one that ever saw it. And nobody else anywhere else would have ever seen it. And now today, at the big events like Comic-Con, now if they show something in a panel, it's almost immediately released after the panel to the general public.
Right.
And that kind of, that kind of negates everything. That you go there as a public participant live and in person to go see these conventions. You pay all that money, you go to through all the trouble to get your tickets and everything, and then everybody gets to see what you saw anyway.
Yeah.
I just kind of want to add, since we've been kind of tiptoeing around this, the description was join guest of honor Bob Koppler on a journey through past, present, and future of Voltron, starting with its humble origins as an experiment on KPLR TV in St. Louis through the critically acclaimed legendary Defender series on Netflix. In addition, he will and did discuss the live-action feature film in development at Amazon Studios and what it means for the franchise. And we got to see some little bit of, footage, not from the movie, but from, when they had to show something to these studios to get them interested. And Ross and Marshall Thurber, who has been, in the media already, announced as the director, put this little video snippet together. And when Bob Koppler President CEO of WEP played that, the room exploded. And for this panel, the room was packed. For a panel where we had to give up our cell phones, which I think in this day and age is, I think it's the longest I've been away from my cell phone in years. It was worth it, and then, Ross and Marshall Thurber couldn't be there. However, he did send a message through Bob, and, Bob played that for us. And, we've been hearing about this live action movie for so long that everyone's like, yeah, we'll see when it happens. But it's really feeling real this time.
Mhm.
And the excitement around it, I was excited just to be in the room with or without a cell phone, to hear Bob's enthusiasm and to hear from a director who really seems to know Voltron and is a fan of Voltron. So I'm more excited than ever about it. And I will love when we're in theaters hearing it in, Dolby Digital surround sound. And it's just going to be exciting times for Voltron and the whole fandom.
Yeah, just to for folks who haven't really followed the news all that much, a movie has been a pipe dream for many, many years, some 15 years, probably longer than we'll ever really know. There are a lot of steps that go in the making of a film. So what we saw was very exciting, but there are a whole lot of steps between wherever they are now and whatever might bring a feature film onto the screen. So what we saw was definitely very exciting. I'm totally in that zone. But these things do take time and cost a lot of money. So I just want to check a little bit, have a little bit of a reality check about, it could still be quite a while before we see a feature film. But again, that said, wow, it was awesome.
Okay, well, I still haven't seen it, so I would love to somewhere down the line get a chance to see what you saw. But I heard it really gave people a lot of hope for a really good movie coming out of this.
I would try a Vulcan mind mill, but they don't work well over Zoom, even when you're a human being. So yeah, I don't know what side you're on or I'm on relative to you, but yeah. Anyway, yeah, fun stuff.
Lift up your left arm and just lift it out to the left. Go to your left with the left arm.
My left.
Yes. Yeah. Keep going. Keep going. All right. Right there. All right. Hold on. All right. Go ahead.
Can you sense what we want? Anyway, we tried. Look, we even have the Enterprise here. That would have definitely helped. Nice, Pete.
Yeah,
I like that.
Just maybe bring Spock in, and maybe Spock can handle it for us.
My mind to your mind.
Yes.
My thoughts to your thoughts. Bada boom, bada bing. Anyway.
Okay. That worked.
How's that for crazy? And
I think I just saw an image of Green Lion. Wow. That was weird.
Interesting. Very interesting.
That was weird.
No comment. But anyway,
Okay.
yeah. So do we want to dive into the events that happened on
Yeah.
Saturday and Sunday then?
Hey, can you show us the program there, Pete?
Yep.
All right. So this was the official program you got when you got to VoltCon. And you guys were part of the VIP stuff, so you got to go on Friday night as well. So why don't we start with Friday night? What happened?
We were in the con suite, basically. It wound up, again, there was some confusion, as Shannon mentioned, but we all eventually found our way there. And it was basically just a social event, but a lot of fun, having, we're in a world where we don't have to wear masks like like many of us were continuing to do at VoltCon 2021. So it was good. It was just fun to see a lot of people and chat with a whole lot of like-minded folks. What would you guys say beyond that?
say it's an informal, unstructured, just, free form talking to people.
Was there
Yeah.
food?
Oh yeah, there were several choices among desserts, cookies, lemon bars, a few other things that I don't remember, but like basically simple stuff that you could hold in your hand while talking, not elaborate. You'd need a fork and a plate kind of situation, and
Mhm.
and beverages of different types. I think for me, I remember being there. I remember some of the conversations that happened, but there's also parts of it that are a blur. And I have seen photos of myself Friday night, and I know why. You can tell that the jet lag is still getting to me.
Mhm.
I'm enjoying it, but I'm I'm more soaking sponge than I really talked to a bunch of people, which was a little bit of a downer for myself personally. But I know everybody stayed quite a while, and they enjoyed what they were doing, and that's what counts.
Oh, good.
It was
And
fun.
we saw a lot of Voltron pajamas from the Voltron store.
Yes, that is true. I remember that.
This is
That's
true.
awesome.
Maybe next year, depending on where they hold the convention, maybe a bunch of people wearing Voltron pajamas can go shopping late night at a Walmart.
Then you might show up on another website.
Walmartians? Is that still a thing? Anyway, but
Well, that's
yeah,
cool.
that could be cool. Yeah,
That's
it was fun.
cool. So people were enjoying the Friday night festivities, and some of them
Oh,
were
yeah.
relaxed in their Voltron PJs.
Correct.
Yeah.
All
was
right.
cool.
So how did things get started on Saturday then?
Things got started on Saturday with Greg and Shannon with their panel from days of long ago, or not.
As in past years, the podcast seems to get a panel before they officially do the opening.
Right.
And so, Mark, in past years, you've done the whole welcome Voltron fans, your
Yeah.
podcast intro, but for VoltCon.
Right.
And so I did not try to replicate what you do, because what you do is yours, but I did try to do something kind of out there.
Which I
don't know
definitely
if that-
appreciated,
Okay.
because I'm not that type of personality at all. I mean, I know you say you're an introvert, but I can't do that.
Well, I just decided, I think I said something like, welcome Voltron fans to VoltCon 2022 or something like that. Like
Yeah.
a game show announcer, yeah.
Right.
Anyway.
It was definitely what we needed first thing in the morning, though, to get into the vibe of, okay, we're gonna review some Voltron information, get some information that I always find. I've been a fan of Voltron since the beginnings, watched it when I was 6 years old, and I always get new ways of looking at it through the panels.
So let's describe what this panel was all about. Can you do that for us, Shannon?
Oh yeah, I can definitely do that. Basically, the genesis of it was I started going through a bunch of my notes from when I was 13, watching the original show, of various questions that I'd had, and then continued to build on that. My one real regret about the structure in the end was that I wish I had had a way to better design it, that Greg and I could have gone back and forth, and because it meant I had to keep
You did a
going
wonderful
and
job.
going. Yeah, that's why I threw it too early. There's that one part where I turned to you, and because I asked you to start at a certain point because I thought I could go that long, and I was like, and you also have to bear in mind, for me, remember, I'm the one from the West Coast. You're talking about the 10 a.m. panel. My brain's operating on 7 a.m. time.
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
And I'm like
Absolutely.
trying to, I was like, okay. But Pete did a good job of recording the whole panel, but there were several requests for folks to see the slides in greater detail. And also, I know there were some areas where the description was just so dense, even in my telling it, that it would probably be easier to reread them.
Mhm.
So I did an export of the PowerPoint without audio, and I've given that to Marc to put up on the website so that people can scrub that at their leisure and just watch it play out. Because even by the time we were done, Bob was at the panel and we were done. That was Bob's first request is, can you get this out there so everybody can see it? And I said to him, well, at that time, I'll be honest, I didn't even know that I just thought Pete might have been taking stills in the front row. I didn't know he was taping. And so I said to him, Bob at the time, I said, well, Kim's not here like she normally is. So I've been thinking about different ways of how I do that. Would I provide it with an audio soundtrack? Would I do this or that? We'll get back to you. And the whole time I'm looking right at Pete, not knowing you actually were running your iPhone, which I thank you for immensely. That means a lot
Oh, yeah.
to me. It really does. So I went through the history of like the original shows, the Third Dimension, and also Vehicle Voltron, and also the Go Lion and Die Rugger iterations. We were making sure to get that in there all the way through, because for those who don't know, since we haven't brought it up yet, this year was the 40th anniversary of Die Rugger, which is the source material for Vehicle Voltron. So in a way, we became a way to celebrate Vehicle Voltron across the board, which is why both heads appear on the program. But by the time I got to the Devil's Due comics take on the Lion Force, that's where my brain just kind of was like, okay, Greg, can you take over? And then Greg took Voltron Force and Legendary Defender to the end of it. And I thank you for splitting that with me, because 50 minutes just me would have been kind of long.
Yeah, no problem. I think it was great that we did manage to cover the comics, because to a lot of old school Voltron fans, that was a first rebirth, I guess you could say, of Voltron. Well, after the Third Dimension, it was bringing, so I guess the second regeneration of Voltron, and really got a lot of people interested again, and so it's cool to include that as well. Yeah, that was a fun panel, and it was. I always feel a little bit of pressure whether anytime I happen to be part of the panel that precedes opening ceremonies. And this was no exception. There was a little bit of that, but it really, I think it went really well. And I would say 99.9% of the reason for that was Shannon. She did a wonderful job preparing. So
thank you.
Okay.
There's one thing that really struck me when Steve Sterling spoke on Saturday night. He talked about at the end of toward the end of his speech, and I'm paraphrasing him, and it's better just to hear him say it. But the idea that, to pay attention to the details, the effort they took to try to put it together, but not to get bogged down by it. And I just want to be very clear, because I stopped and I never thought of it that way. I mean, everything that I did when I put the Origins panel together was, and I make a point of it, or tried to in the beginning, was here are the different things that are out there to let the imagination run wild, but it's not, the intent is not to, pick it apart into 1,000 pieces and sit there and complain about it. And I in no way want that to reflect on any way that I think they fell short, because as we were talking about earlier, what they were asked to do was essentially a miracle. The fact that these little tiny things were left, it's just fun to look at it. But obviously we enjoyed it for the whole, for what it is. Sorry, Pete, but that was really important for me to want to say after the fact.
No, I'm glad you jumped in with that, because it kind of sparked even more of where I was going. And, at first I was just going to say how masterfully you wove it all together, and then getting some of that comic knowledge in there as well. But, just going from Defender of the Universe into the Third Dimension, and which is 5 years later, as you pointed out, but then also Voltron Force, which is 5 years later, and having it be, the concepts of different dimensions being introduced long before any other, more recent fandoms have been using that. And looking at it from that lens made me appreciate it even more, and how it's always brought up that, the Voltcoms from Voltron Force are somewhat like the Bayards from Voltron Legendary Defender, and how even though all of these are different, they all had their origins in Go Lion, and bringing it right up to Voltron Legendary Defender, where I think they blended those two together, with names, with places, and then hearing, Koran say the Diamond Galaxy, but then it's later the Danubian Galaxy. I was just amazed at the knowledge given, after watching it for all these years, that I can still pick out of these.
Cool.
Yeah, so not only were the details covered, but as Shannon alluded to, things that weren't nailed down that fans can speculate about. For example, is Voltron, is there any sentience in Voltron? Lion Force Voltron, for example. There are many aspects that even in Go Lion and Die Rucker were not covered in detail, and that's fine. And frankly, it's kind of fun to speculate about those things. So, those are some things we could celebrate. I mean, not everything has to be spoon fed to an audience, and so it's fun to find those little tidbits and try to reverse engineer the lore from the hints that we get, which is it's just fun.
This is where you were talking about Voltron Defender of the Universe Lion Voltron from 1984. And you had mentioned a trivia question.
Here's one that some of you might know. Koran explains at their first meeting, meaning the first meeting of himself and the Space Explorers, that Eris was once known as the most beautiful planet in the galaxy. For those of you familiar with most of the series, that's the Danubian Galaxy. That's not what Koran says the first time they meet him. What is the galaxy's name? What does he say?
Natalie, I'm so surprised you know this. Just kidding. What is it? The Diamond Galaxy.
Yes, you had it right there. So yeah, this was kind of one of the reasons, if any of you have ever seen the star map or read the history on it, I started this and then had a long conversation with the late Bill England about it when we were deciding to do the third dimension star map. I said, okay, Koran's under a lot of stress. It's just a bunch of strangers on its world. One of the things that hasn't been defined is what are the name of the solar systems? And so that's what I did, and Bill decided to run with it when we merged stuff together, was all the different star systems. That's why they have like the Diamond Star System, the Onyx Star System. They're all what we know as Earth, precious jewels and minerals, was to.
So here's a cool part of your whole presentation here. Not only did you have a trivia question in the middle of this, which of course Natalie answered right?
Mm-hmm.
Because Natalie is like the queen of trivia, right?
She is.
If
Oh, yeah.
Natalie's
Oh, yeah.
if Natalie's on your team, you're going to win.
That's true.
I learned that last year. So the other thing is that you got a chance to talk about this Danubian galaxy and how you had figured it all out back in the day, and that you had help from Bill England. Bill England was one of the people that was in that that video, The Birth of Voltron, that was on the 2006 DVDs.
Mm-hmm.
And he's also known as the guy that designed the Voltron logo, right?
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
So he was a big part of that team back in 1984, and you got to work with him.
That is correct. At the time that I was speaking with him, he was still doing creative work for them. At that time, they were working on material for the website to go with the third dimension, which is why he had been put in touch with me. And from the notes that I uncovered more recently, I believe that was based directly on the fact that I had reached out in the past to Ted Koppler, which we've talked about on another podcast, because the date, there was a circled date on my notes, and it's the year that I contacted Ted. But basically, when we wanted to do the map, the majority of it is what I already had done out and put out on my website, which had been out public for a number of years. Bill tweaked a couple things. He added a couple elements, one of which we ran into this last year in the trivia contest. And is that if you know, most people obviously have not seen it. There's some shots of it on the internet. For some people who do have copies of it, they grabbed. If you look at it, there is one point where there is a Merlandian asteroids, or over, I think it's the Crimson Quadrant. So in his mind, Merla was from the Danubian galaxy, but I know that stuff was done for the 30th anniversary book that puts her somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And so technically there's two different answers for that. And
Right.
I have my take on how both can be true. that's for another time. But it was a very neat experience. I did not know at the time that he had been involved with the logo and to the extent of it. So for me to actually see those interviews on the DVDs years later, and like, yeah, I remember that voice because what little we did was all by phone back then. I'm like, so I got to learn more about him at that point. And yeah, it was really nice to be able to bring that personal bit of myself into it. Here's a bunch of facts of, oh, by the way, here's what became of that.
Mm-hmm.
So
Really cool.
yeah, I'm glad I got to do it. It really was a lot of fun to do, and I'm glad that I've gotten the feedback that folks enjoyed it as much as they did, because I didn't know how it would be received. So thank you.
Good. Very good. All right. So what happened after that panel?
The VoltCon 2022 opening ceremonies with Kevin Clark and Patrick O'Connor. And, they did their introductions and welcomed us all to VoltCon, which is always, for me, the welcoming coming after the first panel is always a little strange, but it's always a kind of a VoltCon tradition now.
Yeah.
Yep.
So opening ceremonies, and then after opening ceremonies, what did we go to?
We went to the evolution of the super robot, which is a panel that Patrick did that traced the evolution of the super robot genre through anime's history from its initial influences in the 70s and 80s heyday and beyond. And he highlighted the first super robots, the combiners, which later influenced the development of Voltron. And during that panel, he played snippets of all of the opening themes. And he discussed, something that Greg is very knowledgeable on how not all of these super robots transformations could be easily transformed into a toy.
Right.
And, he mentioned some, I think they were the getters, the robo getters, that just, there was no way of making those transformations go into a toy.
Animation magic. Yeah. I will say that regrettably, I was not able to attend every panel at VoltCon. I don't think anyone could attend every panel. But we collectively had 4 panels between Shannon and myself. Well, the interview was just me on the stage,
but still, that was a huge amount of time on Saturday alone. That's the point.
Yes,
we were pretty booked on Saturday.
Yeah, and then Bob Koppler asked me to assist with his presentation too, so I was up there for that as well. So
what did you have to do?
I was the slide person. And I'm the next. But doggone it, I clicked that next button like a champion. But honestly, so the panels that I did miss, unfortunately, Patrick's was one of them. It was not from lack of interest, but just needing to get out and breathe every now and then, and get a little bit of, just get out and eat something or what, you know what I mean. Point is, I think that we all go through that. But
what time had the vendor hall opened up, the Space Mall?
9:30 for VIPs. And we got to go in and see, Tiffany from the Voltron store, and VIPs got the sneak peek, and then everyone else got to come in at 10.
Okay, so for most people it was 10 o'clock, but for VIPs it was 9:30, and then it was open until when?
I think the Space Mall was open till what, 5?
It was 5 because it closed right at the end of the Die Rucker panel. I remember us talking about this.
Okay.
And that's the other thing while we're talking about layout that was oddly different for this one. I mean, obviously I didn't go to the first two, but when I was at 2021, the media tables and all of that were in one room. Well, the way that they split it off was that the special guests, Cat's Haven and the charity auction stuff, it's not even on the map, Pete. It's across from the Space Mall, but it wasn't actually written.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
They
that
just
was a
had-
little bit.
Yeah.
That was a bit awkward, and I suspect this is probably not something that had been, part of the overall plan. Just like the con suite went up on the fourth floor rather than the first. Unfortunately, a lot of the folks who were sitting at those tables in that room did not get a lot of foot traffic because it was kind of off in its own area. Now, I believe Starbase Indy had a panel that they were
Yeah, they had a
doing,
table. Yeah. And there was
some
one other local
authors.
con. The authors I thought were they not in the main room? They were
Well,
actually in
I think there was one or more authors in the dealer room, and I thought there might have been one, or maybe just books from one might have been at the Starbase Indy table. I don't recall.
Yeah, I think it was Starbase Indy, Cat's Haven in conjunction.
In
Right.
conjunction, yes.
Yeah, in conjunction
Yeah.
and Starbase Indy were next to each other. And then we were off, but we were never at our, well, no, I take it back. You were briefly at the table on Saturday, but we never really were able to utilize it the way we thought.
Yeah.
Steve should have been right by the door, but I don't know if he ever even used it. And Port
Yeah,
Cat's
I don't
Haven
think
was
so.
around the corner. You had to know they actually got moved into Steve's spot on Sunday so people would see them. And like
Yeah.
you said, I don't fault this on our friendly con preparers at all. There were clearly some curveballs thrown them by the window. I will just say that. And they rolled
Okay.
with it as best they could.
Yes.
They did a good job of
They've,
that.
they've done an amazing job with different venues over the years as well. And I think this is the most space that has been given. And, I think it was well intentioned. That's where Kevin's Castle of Lions, quote unquote dollhouse was that
Mhm.
I would have loved to have played with even now, forget just as a kid. And all of the in that room with the hall and the hall guests and media tables was also all the auctions that were going on. So
Mhm.
I think there was good intention to have good flow through that room. It's just there was so much else going on with the Space Mall that I misquote. It was 10 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Ah,
However,
okay.
with the Space Mall going on with so many great vendors, with the viewing room and the panels, I
right.
think it was just more than we could all take in.
Yeah, like you were saying, Greg, you might not have been able to catch all the panels because of the viewing room, because of the vendor room, all that kind of stuff going on. So, and people just want to hang out with their friends too,
Yeah.
Right. I will say that I have never, ever at any of the 4 VoltCons been able to step into the media screening room where they actually play the different anime shows and all that. I've never been in the room because there's been so many other things happening. But
I did for a short little bit in the first year and the second year, but yeah, that was it.
yeah, there's only so much you can do and with the time you got. So
So I feel bad walking into those rooms because you still want to talk to the people, and some people want to watch the movie or the TV show being played.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you almost have to be quiet in that one because
Yeah.
people want to watch it. So what happened after Patrick's panel?
And we had Steve Sterling,
Sterling.
the interview.
Very
So
cool.
that was, my gosh, that was a lot of fun. So as Marc and Shannon will attest, I was a little in preparing for that. I threw together a bunch of questions and asked them to review, suggest changes, et cetera, et cetera. And I wound up going back on a kind of an earlier thought about them, but in any case, had a pretty good set of interview questions together earlier, or so I thought. And then there was a slight curveball where Steve had already prepared a presentation of his own. So
Yeah.
but it worked out fine because I have a tendency to wing it on this podcast quite a bit. Hopefully it's not too bloody obvious, but rather than do a crap ton of presentation or preparation. But Steve, you know, it was an interactive kind of a thing. It wasn't just him going blah 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 blah. It wasn't that at all. He was very
Right.
passionate about what he has done, what he's doing now. And there was Q&A along the way, and then there were still several things that people could ask him, including me, from my lengthy set of questions, even though I think he probably covered about 80% of what I was planning to ask. It was a great conversation, very insightful. He's very passionate about what he does and what he has done, and it's contagious. When you see someone talking about things that they do or they've done and they're very passionate about it, it rubs off on you, and that was just a lot of fun. So that was definitely a highlight for me.
I think an underlying theme of his interview was the fact that he mentioned that there were a top 5 of things that he's done in his life, top 5 things that he's been involved with, and Voltron was one of those.
Yeah, and that says something, because he's done a whole lot, and you know, Voltron and animation wound up being a fairly small part of his professional background, but it was a very, very big thing for him, and it was just great to hear him talk about it with such fondness.
Yeah.
If I had a single word that I would use to sum up that interview, it would be the word vulnerability. And I'll tell you that something from being here in LA. I think it's really rare to see somebody who has done as much as he has, been as involved as he has, be as open and frank and honest about the good points and the bad as he was. And that amazed me.
And he just kept reinventing himself with different things. And, you know, I knew that I was going to be excited about hearing his Voltron stories, but to find out that on my DVD shelf, he also played a part in Dr. Dre and Eminem's Up in Smoke video, a Motley Crue video that I have. And, you know, I didn't know I had a whole Steve Sterling section that I could build out of DVDs that I never knew he had a part of.
Yeah. He had mentioned Pete Seeger at one point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was one of his bigger things that he was involved with. He had some good stories though about some of the voice actors from Voltron, right?
And so they're working in a mirror, creating characters with their voices. You know, where can I go with my voice? How can I do this? Oh gosh, I can do this. And they're not going to give you one of their characters for nothing, or just for, you know, a one-time only. They didn't know what the show was. Rumors were around Hollywood. Oh, these guys are doing the Japanese overdub retread. You know, God bless them. But when it was like, you know, oh my gosh, 125 episodes. Take your rate times 125 and the residuals. It was like, you know what? I got a really good character for you. And these people came back and they just nailed it. I mean, you could, at a union day rate per episode, you could get, out of one voice actor, you could get 3 voices and 1 sound effect. Sort of odd, really. So you know, okay, you'll do 2 voices. You know, Peter calling, you'll do this and that. Oh, I need a sound effect, Peter. You know, and so you get something. And but once they came in, they were just ripping, and it was just such a joy because you know, Peter was in, we developed the character by their voices. They sold us their sounds. Once they started understanding the characters, I can do this, you know, and I keep citing Peter Cullen because Peter Cullen was a guy, he's got countless credits, I mean, movies and all kinds of stuff, but Peter Cullen would be out, like, you know, at that time it was okay to smoke in the lounge, but he'd be smoking away and stuff, and, you know, he was a whiskey drinker and stuff, and I'd be like, and Peter, it's like how do you think I keep my voice so rough? And he was smoking cigarettes and drinking whiskey, not on the job, drinking anyway, but it was really something where, because what we were doing is we were fitting scenes, and so everything was on the stopwatch. So we had these professionals, and it did pay off. We had them come in, and you could say to any of them, BJ Ward, I go down the whole list, I got them up here because I just want to make sure everybody remembers who they are. and you would say, I need a lot more energy, but I need you to take another second and a half to say it. So think about that. You have to be much more excited about saying something, but you need to take longer to say it. It's a mismatch.
So one thing to keep in mind, for those of you out there who don't already know, because the voice actors were recorded to a pre-existing video track, even though editing was available to retime things, because of the time pressure, the actors were usually recorded to a stopwatch. Is that right?
To a tenth of a second.
Isn't that something?
I could say to somebody, Michael Bell, Michael, I need another take of that. I need just a tenth of a second shorter. Well, you'd really say to yourself, what is a tenth of a second to a voice actor? And I don't actually think they knew. I think we would just keep taking takes, and we'd get there. Oh, great, perfect, good. Okay, we buy that take next, and we just keep going. Yeah, it was. But one of the great delights is working with them. They were very professional, very proud of what they were doing, and it was really fun again to sort of be under this little bit of a thing. The Japanese, what were the retread people? Because when these folks, I keep saying guys, but BJ Ward also, but when they were going around town, or when he worked at Voltron, they're like, and they'd be like, wait till you see it, and then it turned everybody right away, and they're like, oh my God, what do these guys do? And those voices really, as we all see and witness, they gave us this foundation for something of really believable characters that could really, really imbue the characters that were being written and shown. So it was a great joy, and I'll tell one other little weird thing, but if you don't mind, I don't keep you can like give me this.
I am not going to do that.
But LA's a car town,
you
right?
Can talk
so
all afternoon.
so we'd be in the studio, and in LA they had the studios had kitchens. Some of them had chefs. They were really nice, really. I mean, so anyways, we're there, and we're just in a little recording booth. It's like me, you're my associate director, and then right there is the performer. They're right there at a podium, with a microphone and headphones on, one at a time. And so we're hanging out in the kitchen. Yeah, how's it going? Peter's out smoking a cigarette and talking. So I'm standing with Michael Bell and Lenny Weinrib. And again, look these people up. They're just amazing. Michael Bell, you all wouldn't know it, but he was the voice of something called Parquet Margarine. And this one of the longest running.
Flavor says
butter, and then Parquet, and that was him. And it was, I think this thing ran like 15 or 20 years. Michael had two places, one in Palos Verdes, which is south of Los Angeles, this nice sort of peninsula in the Santa Monica Bay, that he called Butter Estates. He had a place up in Santa Barbara, right? A ranch called Rancho Residuales. He got so many residuals. So. Anyways, but I'm standing there and just listening. I'm thinking, these guys are driving up in like Plymouth Valiants and just little Chevys and stuff. I was like, wow, for such a car. I mean, I know from us these people are making a couple $100,000 a year, and I believe they're probably making like $500,000 a year because they're doing Budweiser commercials and movies and all this stuff. And so I just I'm in the parking lot, seeing them come in. I'm like, it's so funny. They're just being such a car town. You'd think these guys would have really nice cars. I'm standing there, and Michael Bell and Lenny Weinrib are chatting, and Lenny was like, I think he was like, Barney on the Flintstones. Again, just look at their credits, it's wonderful. Anyway, so Michael Bell looks at Lenny and says, so Lenny, you still have your Bentley? And they go, oh no, I sold my Bentley, I got a Rolls Royce. And they start talking about cars. I'm like, oh, these are their bumper cars. These guys just drive around these crummy little Plymouth Valiants just to go to the recording studio. Like, oh yeah. And I will say that the Christmas presents I got from these people were almost embarrassing, just because they I was somebody who helped them, make a lot of money. But
all right, so I had just wanted to say that Steve Sterling had given a really cool story about the voice actors, about Michael Bell and his two Butter Estates and Rancho Residuales, and about him and Lenny talking about Bentleys and Rolls Royces, and they come to work in a Plymouth Valiant, So I thought those were great stories.
I was going to say, it was just, I'd forgotten some of that. So it was great to hear that again. Just to hear the detailed memories he's got and how fondly he looks back on those experiences. It's a blast.
I will say real quick, one of the things that I appreciated is that I know historically when there's been guests up like this, it's been you and Marc. that have both been there. Like when I was there last year with Benjamin Kaltenecker, that's what you did. And for a number of reasons, we ended up deciding that it made the best sense for Greg to do it solo, partially because he's better identified with the podcast. I think just having the two of you up there, especially given it was 90 minutes in duration, gave such a wonderful sense of intimacy to it that I'm not sure would have been achieved with two hosts up there.
Mm.
And so I frankly really appreciate the way it turned out.
Yep.
I was surprised that it flowed as well as it did, given the I just didn't expect that there was going to be a presentation up front. But it went really well. Steve was so easy to talk with. It really it made it feel like just a one-on-one conversation. It was just so much fun. I look forward to us chatting with him again on the podcast.
Even after his monologue, I thought the rest of the interview flowed nicely. And I think what was great, we're seeing a pup in the picture now too.
Yes, he's poofing in and out. Hi, buddy.
I thought it was really interesting that when they were reaching out to voice actors, that the voice actors didn't want to give up their best voices, but after they told the agent that it was 125 episodes, that everything turned around.
Right.
And had a lot of weight behind it.
Yep. Money talks.
That was unheard of back then to get a 125 episode contract.
Yeah,
that was
65 is kind of your limit in most cases, right? I mean, the 13 weeks of 5 episodes a week. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what was common then, and it kept getting stripped down. By the time I was on Extreme Ghostbusters, we had a 40 episode season.
Wow.
In most cases, you didn't know if you were going to get more seasons.
Right.
But in the case of Voltron, since they were developing it to be originally a trilogy, they really wanted to have that 125 episode contract. And because it was going out, across all of syndication and everything, they knew they had something good on their hands. All right. So the Steve Sterling interview was great. And what followed Steve Sterling's interview?
We had our cell phones taken for Bob Koppler's Voltron Past, Present, and Future.
Yeah, that was a weird experience because we're sitting there at the end of the interview, and the very next thing we're told is basically, all of you step outside. We need to take your phones. There's no context. Like, oh, okay. And it was like, all right, because normally that's one thing they don't do ever at VoltCon is rarely at cons unless it's like we were talking about in the beginning, the kind of large scale media showings. So that kind of gave me a hint from my experience. In my case, I actually had to run my stuff back up to my room because of work security, I really didn't want to leave my stuff downstairs. I'm like, I'd rather lock it in my room and come back for it. So I don't know what the process was like and Greg doesn't, because Greg wound up being asked to help Bob out on stage. So you got to stay put. So Pete, what was that process like actually having to check in phones?
Oh, I had to check in mine too.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay,
Yes,
both of you
yes.
can talk about that. I can't because I did
Go
what I
ahead,
did.
go ahead though, Pete.
Well, first I was able to talk to Steve Sterling and his daughter for a little while we were waiting in line, because we all had to line up, and it was almost like on the table, Tiffany from the Voltron store had all of these like shoe pockets. It's the only way I could think of it. It'd like be hanging on the back of a door, and we all had to put our phone in, and we got a little ticket with the number that was corresponding to the phone. And everyone's like, oh, I don't want to give my phone up, and we're like, yeah, but Bob cleared the room for this, so when Bob Koppler clears the room, yeah, we're giving up our cell phones. So there had to be 100 cell phones there, it seemed, on the table, all like tucked away. The room was packed, and we all went in line, and I got a picture of me and Steve Sterling, and in the back you could see people lining up to get into the room. So it had to be the most exciting part of the whole weekend, just getting into the room. And then, once we were in there, it was just amazing.
Okay. So that sounds really exciting. And then how did he start the panel?
He asked me to run the slides, and so I ran the slides. You guys could speak to that more than I can. I was on stage kind of going, I hope I don't take too long. Do it at the right times.
He started with the history, how they got to the point,
Mhm.
his father, Ted Koppler, having the vision to do all this, and, the stories we've heard many times, and then he got into the excitement.
Okay.
I was impressed how, knowing that most people would want the excitement, he actually got that story down really, really concise. It was the high point of this, the high point of this, the high point of this, but I know you're here for this.
Did it seem like he did anything similar to the days when they had the Voltron Store live show on Facebook?
I don't think it was anything
No.
zany or wacky. He
No.
played it pretty even.
Okay. All right. I was just
No
wondering if he
smashing
did
into
any of that.
walls.
Plus, I think he
Gonna come
probably
flying
was
in on the
feeling.
chair.
Plus, I think he was probably feeling a little bit of maybe a little bit of stress, since he was doing something that isn't often done
Right.
with this material. And we already talked about the material a little bit early on.
Right.
So yeah.
Right. So I'm sure he had to make sure he got all kinds of permissions before he could even do something like this at VoltCon. And once he got all those and things were done from a legal standpoint, which Bob has a legal background,
Yes, he does.
So
yeah.
So I'm pretty sure he understood everything that went into that. And then they had to make sure that they just had everybody hand in their cell phone so that they wouldn't have anything coming out, on the World Wide Web.
Yep.
And he made it clear that nothing that he showed us was anything official or anything that really tips a hat to, something actually going on, but it was still cool to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were, without venturing over the spoilery line, he had to qualify, as Pete already said, this was a piece made to show the studios what could be possible. No element of it necessarily meant this was how X or Y or Z would look or be. This is how it might be. And that's
Right.
pretty much where he left it.
Cool. Very cool. So what happened after Bob's panel then?
After Bob's panel, Marika had her Robotech, the Macross saga, where she really just went over Robotech first appearing in US television in '85, where it was adapted from, similar to Voltron's origins, and, how they brought multiple shows together, and just reintroducing how groundbreaking Robotech was in '85 after Voltron.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll go with what Greg said earlier. This was one of the places where, and I know Marika delivers well because I went to another panel of hers over the weekend. But this is history that I knew very well. And to Greg's point, I hadn't eaten since breakfast. I had to track something down, or I was going to probably literally fall over.
Mm-hmm.
So this had to be the one. It's like, I know most of this content. So yeah, food had to be more important, regrettably, there. So.
Okay.
But Pete, it sounds like you did actually go.
I caught a couple minutes of it, but I too hadn't eaten since early on, and I knew I was gonna try to record the next panel, so I had to run up to my room and grab some food. But Marika,
sure, that's the
always does a
logistics.
great
You were
job.
following us around all day, and well, Greg and I were booked quite a bit, and where Greg was, I pretty much was on Saturday. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I wasn't able to take part in that panel either, but Marika, of course, is a really good presenter, and yeah, I think all three of us knew the material fairly well. So unfortunately, we did wind up missing that panel. But we love you, Mama Voltron.
Yes, we do.
All right. So what happened after Marika Levine's panel on Robotech?
Die Rugger fighting formation on, which Greg and Shannon can definitely tell better than this description in the book.
Yeah, so it began as I was preparing for that panel, it was going to focus only on Die Rugger because in 2021 I had presented about Vehicle Team Voltron. So the thought was, why be redundant? And then when we had Kevin and Patrick on the podcast, he shared the description of the panel, and it very much indeed covered Vehicle Team Voltron as well. So I had to do an about face on that, and wound up doing a split screen kind of presentation where rather than retread old material, I tried to put it with a Die Rugger focus on one side of the slides and the Voltron equivalent on the other side of the slides. So it was basically introducing Die Rugger and or Vehicle Team Voltron to people who didn't already know the material. So with this being the 40th anniversary of Armored Fleet Die Rugger 15, that was really sort of the motivation. So that was fun. I did reuse, with a lot of changes, some of the graphics that I had prepared for 2021, but most of the material was new. So that was fun.
Like some of the character pictures.
Some of them really. So in 2021, I had this slide with like 50 drools on it, because they had so many commanders and captains and all that other stuff, the revolving door of drool officers. And so I did, those graphics were all reused, but virtually everything else was new. So I wound up even spreading that over a few slides rather than trying to shove it all into one, because as I was going back through and filling in the Die Rugger character names along with the Voltron character names, they just wouldn't fit on that enormous teeny tiny grid of faces that I'd had before. So still, that was a lot of fun. It was fun to point out favorite Die Rugger episodes versus the Voltron counterparts and all that sort of thing. So
when you give the panel, you're allowed to show your favorites.
Yeah, that's what I told him. In fact, when he first did it, it said favorites, and I said put Greg's favorites because these are Greg's. Oh no, own your favorites. And one of the things, the big differences, I think, in approaching this particular one, which was also kind of helpful for me because we all know I like story. Instead of, one of the big things that we did last year was we kind of broke down scene by scene the pilot episode of Vehicle Voltron and how that went. Here we talked, without getting spoilery, that was the tricky part, comparing overall arcs and motivations at a high level. So that if for anybody that would have seen the one the three of us did together the year before, we definitely brought them a different way of looking at it on practically all fronts.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. For example, the differences in the story arc between Commander Hazar and his Die Rugger counterpart, Teles. Deliberately avoiding explaining what happens to that character by the end of the series, for example. Things like that. But that was a lot of fun, and
It's amazing. 40 years later, and we're still trying to avoid spoiling people, right?
That is funny. But Die Rugger is not as easy to watch, to find. Although Toei has been showing. I think Shannon, you said that they're all out there now on the Toei YouTube channel, but some are not.
It's Bandai. It's Bandai. Appears to.
It's Bandai.
Right, it's Bandai on the Bandai Spirits channel. I think it was you who had let us know about the link originally, because we asked Bob about it explicitly. We were like, "Is this licensed?" Because it said web on. He's like, "Yeah, they're out there."
Yeah, that was on Friday.
Friday.
At the con suite, we asked him.
Yes.
Yeah, cool. but I think, didn't you notice, Shannon, that the last 4 episodes did not have the English subtitles?
That's correct. Yeah. So everything with the last 4. So that you can kind of, obviously you can watch them and sort of figure out what's going on, but not all the nuances very easily. But my guess is, this is what I was saying, and we didn't confirm it with Bob. My guess is that Bandai got the rights to stream those on YouTube because they were selling Solo Chogokin and wanted people to recognize the property.
That makes sense. And I have to give Shannon a major tip of the hat with the Die Rugger panel. There's something you had emailed about, Shannon, this is some months back, that you were rewatching some episodes of Vehicle Voltron, and you had noticed something that I had glossed over. That episode, it's production number 146, actually looked and smelled in Voltron, not in Die Rugger, looked and smelled like it was the true final episode as opposed to 152. And I did go back and re-review that based on you pointing that out in an email, and sure enough, that is very much the case. So I think I did point that out in the panel for 2022. But it was one of those details that I had glossed over and didn't sink in for the 2021 presentation. So that was a fun revelation. And I actually went back through the scripts that Webb has so graciously shared with Marc and me for our episode reviews. And that episode was the last Vehicle Voltron episode to be recorded or punched up and written and all that stuff. So it really was indeed intended to be the final episode for that gang. So yeah, so thank you for pointing that out.
I loved your graph with that. The Die Rugger, a nice straight line, and then the way Vehicle Voltron came out all over the place as far as where they fit in.
Interestingly, that the way the show's aired, it doesn't jibe in the sense that the 46th episode, production 146, was not the last new episode to air for the vehicle team. So even that is off. But I would say the same of the Lion Force episodes versus Go Lion. The ones that were adapted from Go Lion did not air in order either. So it's anyone's guess as to what the true narrative sequence of either of those sets of Voltron episodes were. But it does seem certain that at least the 46th episode of the vehicle team episode seems to have been the intended last episode of that sequence.
I just think that one thing that really stood out for me during this panel was between Shannon and Greg's presentation on the fact that they tried making other Voltrons and failed. That it was kind of the only place that I could see where you could have slid in a reason for Lightspeed Electrode Albegus to be able to become Gladiator Voltron. Because it could have been one of those test trial runs. And it's the first time I've been able to figure out a continuity place where you might be able to fit it in with the way things would have had to be rewritten.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Also, if folks have not listened or watched the episode where Seamus Kelly and Marc and I discussed the first two episodes of Albegus that Toei had made available on their YouTube channel.
Right.
That's a lot of fun because we sort of speculated how it might fit in a Voltron context, how it might have been adapted, how it could have been worked in. But you pointing out that specific episode that Shannon and I alluded to in the vehicle team, it does seem like a really interesting place to slot that in.
Okay, so what happened after the Die Rugger panel then?
Well, the Art of Cosplay with Mama Voltron and Eric Stalker, where they looked at how to start they were asking where do you start, where do you begin with a cosplay, and they really gave a crash course and advice on how to get started, the materials to use, and then that went right into the cosplay contest after that.
It's a lot of basics. But the way that they tend to cut it, I noticed this last year too, is that Mama Voltron will focus more on the use of fabrics and sometimes the use of props, whereas Eric tends to get more technical. If you're looking for the lighting, that kind of aspect of it, and I think that they balance it very well that way when they're both up there together.
Okay, go ahead, Pete.
No, I was going to say the same thing. Eric uses the molded foam to build like elaborate costumes, where Marika just is a wizard when it comes to sewing.
Okay, all right. And then we got it rolled right into the cosplay contest, right?
It did.
So how many people participated that you can remember?
Trying to look back at some of the pictures, and they just
I-
don't really do it justice.
No, I felt the same way with mine. I can't remember an exact number, Mark, to your question. It is under 20, but it's above 15. I want to say 17 was the last number. It
Sounds
was
right.
somewhere between 15 and 20.
Groups, like pairs of people?
Well, like the one particular case where the family went up, they were all one number.
Yeah.
I'm remembering,
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the physical numbers that people were
Gotcha.
wearing. I don't
Okay.
remember that exceeding 20.
Is this the kind of thing where people were wearing those costumes throughout the day? Or did they just start wearing them at the time of the contest?
It varied.
Oh, okay.
Some of them had multiple cosplay changes throughout the weekend.
Okay.
And, you know, like a Big Chef cosplay, the one I was talking to earlier from Texas, you know, had two separate hunks from VLD, Katarina and Leonidas, who help out with one of Eric's panels the next day. You know, they go between Keith and Shiro and several other characters. Natalie this year did a Larmina
Mhm.
cosplay that was
Complete
really
with the battle
good.
staff. Yeah.
Nice.
And you know, a lot of VLD in the cosplay, you know, and we always get Ryan in his Kaltenecker costume
Yeah.
during that, and Eric had a wasn't Voltron related, but a GI Joe bat that he
Oh,
did, the Battle
wow.
Android Trooper.
Yeah, that was slick.
So who ended up winning?
I remember that Hunk was, I believe, in the top 3,
Okay.
but there were so many good costumes that the way they announced it, you know, it really was tough to tell who was the overall winner because there was just so much excitement around it. Maybe Shannon, do you remember?
I think the top one was, and I do not know the person's name. This person was new to me. May not be new to the con, but was definitely new to me. The individual who had done up the whole costume as the Green Lion in a week, where that person they had learned sewing from their mother because their mother had been a quilter. That was the one that took the top, but
Okay.
I don't know that person's name.
Okay.
The Green Lion onesie, kind of.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was
Yeah,
cool.
complete with the shield on the back.
Yep.
Yeah.
Nice.
And Tony was second. Was third Larmina? Natalie?
Might have been.
Yeah, I think Natalie was third.
Okay. Cool. So do you think this year's cosplayers stepped up from previous years, or do you think that it was a different crop of people this year? You had mentioned there were some new people,
Tony was new from Big Chef cosplay.
right?
There were definitely some new faces. I would not have recognized Natalie as Larmina compared to, you know, being Voltron Force Pidge.
Right.
So, you know, we saw some of the same costumes or cosplays from VLD, but everyone brought something different to the table, at least for the contest.
Cool.
Yeah.
Indeed.
So what happened after the contest?
Then we had a short break before the shakeups, Legendary Defenders Live, which is always fun, you know, when you have a house band.
Yeah. Well, didn't they have a new song this year that had to do with Vehicle Voltron?
They did.
It sounded, I know I've heard it before. I don't remember if they had it at VoltCon last year, but I had heard it before. But it was great. It was fun to hear.
That's cool. Of course, they always finish with "Video Killed the Radio Star," right?
Yes, yes.
It's normally yours and Kim's favorite part of it for that song, not because it's the end.
Right. So after the shakeups, didn't they do a little presentation of Steve Sterling to introduce a couple of episodes?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So Steve Sterling introduced a couple of Voltron Defender of the Universe episodes.
From Voltron Lion Force, it was Uric gets his pink slip, and then from Vehicle Force, it was Planet of the Amazons.
Nice.
And
Yep.
Steve just gave a general overview.
Well, I was going to say, this is where I fall out for the night, because after that, they went into a screening of 3 Voltron Legendary Defender episodes. At that point, I got up. I had to interrupt you in a long conversation, as I understand it, you had with Steve Sterling in the back. I thought he ducked out after the intro. I didn't realize he was still there. But poor jet lagged me. I mean, I wanted to stay up all night with everybody. But having been up early, the time difference and everything, I had to go to bed. And so thank you for letting me cut in for about 5 minutes to talk to Steve again. And then I went upstairs and frankly, I went to bed. So at this point, I'm off the radar.
Okay.
Whatever happened the rest of the night, I don't know.
Yeah, I was off the radar at roughly the same time. I don't remember if I disappeared before or after Shannon did, but yeah.
Yeah, Steve Sterling stuck around for the entire screening of the Lion Force and Vehicle Force right through Legendary Defenders. I had a great conversation with him. We had found out that we know some people in common from where I am here in Pittsfield, Mass.
Wow.
Wow.
We talked a little bit about that. I found out that from his daughter when I told her where I was from, and she explained a business person around here. But during the episodes, during Planet of the Amazons, and listening to the voice acting, you know, the leaders of both teams were both voiced by Neil Ross.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked Steve Sterling if, you know, they saw that that was going to be a problem if the 2 lead characters had the same voice. And he kind of alluded to it was discussed, but they were just in such a rush. And it ended up working.
Mm-hmm.
But I hadn't noticed, you know, how much of the voices were the same until, you know, watching them back to back, you know, with Steve Sterling there to ask questions with. And he was just wonderful all weekend.
Wow.
Yeah.
And a few people went up, and I, you know, was able to get my Puzzles and Maze book signed by him after, which was cool.
That's
Cool.
fun.
You know, and just, I think he was amazed by the fact that it's still around, and, you know, that VLD just kind of picked up and, you know, reimagined it.
Very nice. All right. So that was Saturday. Tell us about the Sunday schedule.
Sunday schedule, you know, a bunch of us met for breakfast again, which was good. You know, catching up with our friend Saeed from Texas. He joined us that day, and you know, other people. And you know, we do have some pictures from breakfast that morning. It was great having, you know, people bring their children to this, so we got to see, you know, them enjoying it. Saeed's son was there, and you know, we caught up with Kyle, and then we went into the trivia contest, which was Kevin Clark and Tara Scully this year.
Right.
And of course, you know, if you had Natalie at your table, you were going to do well. And the rest of us, we tried hard.
Right. So how many teams were there?
That was kind of
Just
the
2.
interesting
Just
point.
2. Okay.
Well, depends on
2.5.
how you followed it. 2.5, because I was taking pictures the whole time. I'd already told Kevin I was not going to be in it this year.
Okay.
And so there was a bunch of you at one end, and you had Natalie on your team, Greg, a bunch of you were at that end. And there was the other group at the yellow table by the other door. Well, there were people that kept coming in during that have never done this before, because the difference in layout was that the 4 tables for trivia were at the back behind the main seating. So everybody was coming into the main room and just kind of sitting down. Were they with the team? Were they not? And organically, kind of the blue team grew on its own throughout the course there, because that was where Marky was and his daughter and a couple other people that whose names that I don't know. Until Tony showed up too. And they just all started sitting at the blue table and they were like, are we with yellow or separate? Because I remember Tara and Kevin were trying to figure out how to count them. And eventually I think they just started counting them separate from what I could figure by watching it.
We
Okay.
found out that the toy collectors table was not going to be the winners of trivia overall.
They would be the winners of the merchandise trivia, probably. Right?
Potentially.
Oh, undoubtedly. Undoubtedly.
So, did everybody have a good time at trivia?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Natalie did a great job winning the contest for us.
Okay. What happened after the trivia contest?
We moved into Eric Stalker's cosplay creations, which is what Greg started talking about earlier with Katarina duct taping Leo to show some sort of technique, I guess, of getting body form or something. And they were just having way too much fun on stage.
It was hilarious. It was like plastic wrap and then duct tape over that. That was fun.
Wow.
They were laughing their heads off at different points. It was pretty cool.
And during that, I actually went out and I know we talked about Space Mall before, but you know,
Oh, yes.
Katarina also does some great art that was she was selling, and she's done VoltCon 2022, VoltCon 2021, and I think my personal favorite was the VoltCon 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And Katarina signed all of them for me, and these are always available at VoltCon.
Wow.
You know, during Space Mall, but it just shows the versatility of, you know, an artist selling their stuff in the Space Mall and up on stage doing cosplay and shipping panels.
Yeah.
So
I should point out that a couple of folks in the Space Mall that we've seen before, I'm sure there were others, but a couple that came to mind were Kajira, she was back, and Archie Cunningham was back as well. And I know there were some more returning people, but those are the two who come to mind offhand.
Yeah, I got an Archie Cunningham original this
nice.
year.
Very nice.
Nice. I like it.
Very cool. Now, one thing that we had mentioned about in the panel when we had talked about trivia questions within the panels, we had asked one trivia question from each panel for Let's Voltron, and the winner, whoever got it right, would get a button, right?
Yes. So for the podcast, so it was
Yeah.
a Let's Voltron, one of the pin back badge kind of things.
Yeah.
And and
Pete's
we were
got his.
All right.
Hey!
There we go. Very cool. Thanks for showing that off, Pete.
Yeah, I think we gave away to various people throughout the con, all but I think maybe 3 or 4. So they got around. That was fun. And Mark, thanks for ordering those. And
Yeah, no
shipping
problem.
these so I could bring them. Yeah.
I thought that was something that was cool to bring, you know, that we hadn't done before.
Yeah.
So I think it was Shannon's idea, right?
Actually, look, we have to do the credit back to the right person. Greg had talked about wanting to do something like that, but that he
Okay.
hadn't had the time.
It's for
we had-
last year. And
Yes, for
we
last
ran out of
year,
time.
and you
Yeah.
mentioned it offhand to me at some point. I had the brainstorm at one day when I was at work. You had alternative means to run these, maybe. So I just asked you on a lark, do you think you could do it? And you did it.
Thank you, Mark.
Mark,
Yep.
Thank you,
Forgive-
everybody. Group effort.
forgive me for not preparing you for this question, but are these available on the T Public store?
Yes, they are.
All right, I thought I
So-
recognized that design because I've ordered the shirt.
Yeah.
So I know you can get the shirts and you can get stickers and
Yeah,
buttons made of them
so
and stuff.
basically you can get buttons. There's 2 different sizes. There's like a smaller and a larger. And you can get those for any of the designs that we have out on the Let's Voltron T Public store. So you can get our podcast logo, or you can get one of the things that we had done by artists. So that was really cool.
Yeah, those
So-
were a hit.
Yeah, great.
Very much so.
Very cool. All right. So after Eric's panel, then.
We got to introduce you on Zoom with Castle of Lions. Yes.
Check it out. That's Voltron.com, and I'm the podcast co-host, Greg Tyler. This is Shannon Muir. Many of you have probably seen or heard us throughout the weekend. So, Marc, take it away, sir.
Okay, I'm going to get us kicked off. We're talking about a very... Okay, so we're talking about Voltron's unsung hero, the Castle of Lions. And of course, everybody is in a little mini Castle of Lions right now for that main room. So we are going to talk about a lot about how the Castle of Lions, came to be and how it was used by the Voltron Force and the Voltron Paladins in different versions. And we're going to really focus mostly on the Defender of the Universe and Voltron Legendary Defender.
Okay. So we also got to do a little section where we talked about some of the merchandise that had Castle of Lions associated with it. Okay. So basically, the thing is when I was presenting, you would see on the screen what I was presenting, right?
Mhm.
But I have a version that I had recorded myself of the panel, and I'm actually going to be able to share that too, and you can see what I saw.
Yeah. There's no obvious sign of where that would drop down, right?
Yeah, speaking of the castle ship, what always kind of confused me was where, like you said, where some of the rooms went, particularly like, where's Alfor's script after that point? I mean, when the different castle comes up, I figured they had previously been going down to the new castle to see him, so he was probably in there. But when you've lost that much of the castle, where logistically is his script by that point? Because a lot of the bottom's missing.
Interesting thought. And in Legendary Defender, I always wondered who built on Eris, who built the bridge that you saw connecting to the castle when it was embedded in the hill. It seems like there would have been a past civilization before the erosions that we saw in the show.
Marc, to reiterate the question that was phrased, is Koran seems really surprised as Castle goes from iteration, especially the key to the fortress.
Right.
How much? It seems like he should have known, but how much do you think he actually knew?
Okay. So here's the thing. He knew about the castle ship, the castle becoming a ship. He knew about that because he announced it in the conference room to everybody, and he had the key and he was hoping he would never have to use it. So he knew about the castle turning into a ship. He didn't know about the second castle within the castle. And they didn't find that out until Alfor told them. So there was two things there. He didn't know about the new castles coming out of the ground, but he did know about the castle ship.
Okay.
So you can see it from my version and you can see it from this version. And we'll play a little bit of both so you can see the different versions. But this is what people in the room saw, and this is what I would have seen on the call. So
It completely explains why we have little computers on the desk with us, so that Marc could see us.
So that was really cool. It was a total unique experience, something I had never done before, where I was part of a panel, but remotely. And I had seen, lots of different things done on stage, where they have a lot of resources. They have a lot of people, technical people that are working to bring these live remotes happening, in the middle of panels for major studios and things like that. But this is the first time it's been done, by the podcast at this small scale, at a convention. So I thought it turned out really nice.
And thanks again to Ricky for working their audio visual wizardry to make that happen.
And we talked about the Castle of Lions, obviously, but we had a thrust on the Voltron Legendary Defender and Voltron Defender of the Universe, and not so much on the Third Dimension and Voltron Force. Obviously, there was more things in Voltron Force we could have shown, because there were 26 episodes that had a lot of things happening in a Castle of Lions. And Voltron, the Third Dimension, also had 26 episodes, but it wasn't as clear, you know, what was going on within a Castle of Lions all the time. Sometimes it was very dark and you couldn't see very well. So I know that there was some specific rooms within the Third Dimension that they were in and things like that, but I just don't think it would have been as good visually in a presentation like this, especially when we had so much more material from 78 episodes of VLD and, you know, I guess 72 episodes of Lion Force Voltron.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, but I think that presentation turned out really well, Marc. You obviously prepared well, and it was fun to have you there virtually. Physically would have been better, but virtually was great.
Mhm.
And I'm amazed that you did not take the opportunity to mimic Max Headroom, being the head on the screen that you were. But kudos to you.
thanks.
One of my favorite things with the castle from the Defender of the Universe is when it becomes the ship.
Oh,
I would
yeah.
still love to have a ship toy from there. So it's just great seeing the different ways a castle can be used.
Oh, I thought it would have been cool to have a castle ship toy from any of the versions that actually showed a castle ship. So, yeah.
Yep.
That would have been great.
Yeah, and I do wonder though. I can't remember if I asked this or thought about this during the panel or not. You know, the Defender of the Universe Castle of Lions sheds a whole lot of itself to reveal the spacecraft. I do wonder if there are any bathrooms left on the ship after they discard all, all the armor and everything else.
You gotta sacrifice some things in order to make a ship out of it, right?
That's right, darn it. It's propellant, darn it. Anyway.
Okay, so what happened after the Castle of Lions panel?
After the Castle of Lions, we had another panel, believed by Marika, with Gundam Wing, the After Colony timeline. And I remember being in it for a little of it. I loved watching Gundam Wing when it was on Cartoon Network back in the day. And it was just a good overview of another, a giant robot series that we got to enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
I personally found it to be very well constructed. I will go on record, I have not seen anything at all from Gundam whatsoever.
Wow.
By the end of this panel, it was like, I know she says there's multiple versions of things, but this is definitely showing me how remiss I am in not having managed that in all this time, because there's a lot of deep detail and interesting story going on there too.
Yeah, definitely. I was at the panel. I think I might have seen one of the very earliest Gundam stories way back in the day, but I don't remember it well at all. One of my very close friends is a huge fan of Gundam Wing, but we've never talked about it in detail. So this was essentially all new to me. I did ask a lot of really dumb questions because I didn't understand, because she was saying AC after colony, and I went, what does that mean? So she set me straight. But that was really fun. That was a very informative panel.
It's hard
Alright.
keeping some of various timelines straight, so it was a good way to get that reintroduction after not
Yeah.
seeing it for so long. Can't believe it came out, I think, close to 25 years ago.
Oh, okay. And then what was after the Gundam Wing panel?
After Gundam Wing, Katarina and Leonidas Lanchin gave us the VLD Let's Go Shipping panel. And this
Okay.
was an encore presentation of the Voltron shipping panel, and they did a detailed rundown of every cannon and fan ship for Voltron Legendary Defender, and this was really aimed at newer VLD fans that are into shipping, which for any of the listeners don't know is when two characters are, I guess, linked romantically, whether or not be canon or just fans wanting two people to date from the show.
Okay.
Now,
Yeah.
as Pete has already pointed out, this was an encore presentation of content from last year, Saturday night.
Mhm.
I did attend the one last year, Saturday night. So I was out working on basically wrapping things up and winding them down. We still had the table to take apart. There were some other little things like that. And Greg also sat in. I don't remember if you sat in on
Yeah.
the full panel, but the majority of it with me last year. So
Yeah, I
we did not
definitely-
attend this because it was strictly labeled an encore. We're like, it's the same content. We got to go take the table down. We got to do other
Yeah.
stuff. So I
Yeah.
trust Kat and Leo did the 2 thumbs up job we saw last year.
enjoyed it last year and was not able to see it this year for the reasons that Shannon mentioned. But yeah,
And was that the last panel before the closing ceremonies?
That was.
Okay. So I have to ask, at the closing ceremonies, did they mention that there would be VoltCon in 2023?
No,
They did not.
at that time they said we're working on it. They made no promises.
Oh, okay.
So that came out since.
Okay.
And I thought that's very fair of them, because especially with everything they had gone through that weekend in particular, like I said, there's hints. We don't know the full aspects of it, but some of the differences that were going on with how the logistics of this in the hotel, maybe they wanted to be absolutely sure before they said something. And if that's the case, I respect it. I really do.
Okay. That makes sense. So how did the closing ceremonies go? Everything go okay through that?
Yeah, for
Yep.
the closing ceremonies, we got to find out who won the silent auction,
Okay.
and I think they raised a lot of money. I think a combination of between the con and Cat Haven,
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
they did split it.
Right.
and just I'm looking at the the number of people involved, and it's like close to like 15 to 20 people, who make the con happen, and just kudos to them. It's just
Right.
such a good time.
They're completely volunteers.
yeah, every one of them.
Yep.
And mega kudos to everyone who had donated to the charity auction, including you, Shannon. You had a couple of your literary publications, right?
That is correct. I think one of the most interesting ones that they had this year was the guitar from the Shakeups.
Oh,
Yeah, that
I-
was quite something.
I was like, wow, it was a black Fender, I know, because Leo Fender, and it started out in Fullerton, where my husband is from. So I know about Fenders. I believe it was a Stratocaster, but don't quote me on that part. But it was black, and it had a Black Lion logo on it and everything. And I'm like, they are auctioning off a guitar here?
wow.
Very cool.
That was
So
impressive.
That went to the owner of Comic Carnival, I believe.
Wow.
I think you were right.
But there's a wide variety of different things. Like in my case, I came home with, they did, like through Walmart where you can do photos and that kind of thing. They
Mhm.
did a jigsaw puzzle of the logo, like that Pete and I have on our t-shirts. I
Yeah,
got that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
There's the
Oh, you do have a picture of it.
yeah.
Cool. That's the guitar.
Cool. Very nice.
I know diddly about guitars, but it was impressive to see.
That was a Bo Diddley joke.
That was just diddly. I'm not that clever at this hour.
All right. So the auction items, the charities, anything else happen in that closing ceremonies?
It's always an emotional moment. I mean, I know that
Yeah.
the people who run the con put their a whole lot of blood, sweat, and tears into it. So by the time it comes to a close, it can be pretty emotional for some folks, and especially when they're getting a lot of applause from very appreciative attendees. So it's such a fun time. I think the emotion of it being all over after so many weeks and months of preparation, it's a pretty big deal, and everyone looks forward to it every year, and it's emotional for everybody else too. So
Yeah. Well, I just want to say a big thank you to Kevin and Patrick and Savannah and Ryan and all the rest of the volunteers, especially Ricky on the AV stuff. The shakeups and everybody who's involved in planning for this and getting us ready for a really good weekend in October. And I really appreciated them, accommodating the whole remote thing with me and you guys. So I think they did a great job.
completely agree.
Yeah. And one of the things that I wanted to mention also was Elizabeth had sent me ribbons. Do you have
Yeah.
those, Shannon, that you can show?
I will take a shot at doing this.
Yeah, but yeah, you got it now. Cool. All
Okay.
right. So Elizabeth had made those and she was giving them out everywhere, right?
She did give them out to people who asked. They did come automatically in the VIP bags.
Yeah.
So they were accessible to everybody, but they were automatic. Like that's where mine were. They were already in my bag. So, and that's a lot of trouble to go to. And this is an art unto itself. So definitely appreciate it.
So these are things that you could add to the bottom of your badge if you wanted to, right? Because it has a sticky side to it.
Yep, that's what they're designed to do. And you just
Right.
what I was holding there is the badges there, and then there's string one to the next to the next. And usually I've seen models of these. The only other
Thanks,
time
Pete.
I've seen them is like LostCon, and I believe the one time I went to WorldCon. It would be like if you went to different events or different rooms or different parties, that was part of your encouragement to go socialize, was that how many of these, it becomes a contest, how many of them can you pick up for where you've been.
Right.
Okay. This was all new to me. I'd never heard of the whole ribbon thing before. So
Well,
that's interesting.
I can tell you for other cons that I've been to, like New York Comic Con, San Diego Comic Con, they used to do it where they would include the ribbon in your badge, package, whatever you want to call it, in the lanyard, and then you could pull it out and you could put the ribbon at the bottom. And if you were a speaker, you could have the speaker ribbon at the bottom. If you were press, you could have the press ribbon at the bottom. If you were a vendor, you could have the vendor ribbon at the bottom, that kind of stuff. So I always had the press one, obviously, but it was something that you could put on the bottom, but it didn't mean that was your only identification of you being that type of an attendee. The badge itself showed what you were too.
Yeah, that's fascinating, and mega thumbs up to Liz for creating those and sharing them with so many people.
Yeah, thank you, Liz.
Came out really well. I go to city council ones, and we get like counselor association ones. So I'm much happier having a Drool Empire VoltCon 2020.
Yeah, and there's probably people in other places around the country who wouldn't even know what that is.
Exactly.
City
All right.
council, what's that? Oh, you meant the Drool Empire. Okay.
Yes, I meant the Drool Empire. All right. So any final remarks on VoltCon before we leave this podcast?
I think I I really do have one other thing that I want to add.
Okay.
Greg, I'm sorry that you weren't able to join a number of us that were still there for dinner on Sunday night. But I had one of the most moving experiences of my life Sunday night, and it was not something I would have expected to come out of VoltCon.
Wow.
Tara was there, and Eric and his wife Amy, and Mama Voltron was there, and I met some new folks that I hadn't met before.
Cindy and her
Cindy and
mom.
Ruth, and
Yep.
I can't think of Cindy's husband's name. I'm so sorry.
George, maybe.
Thanks. But there were two people across from me, one of which is Kennedy, who's come before in the King's Archon outfit. And Ruth had been asking about my background. And one of the things that came up was I mentioned having worked on Neopets a number of years ago. In fact, for anybody who was at Origins, that's what I was alluding to when I said I was working for Viacom at the time, because Viacom owned Neopets when Voltron Force was running on Nicktoons.
Mhm.
And as I'm talking about that, Kennedy mentioned I used to play Neo and then switch, or sorry, say some different word, and then switched to Neopets. And I looked and I said, Kennedy, were you about to say Pet Pet Park? Kennedy says yes. And I said, I helped launch Pet Pet Park. I never talk about that because nobody knows what it is. And I mean, and VoltCon is the last place that I thought that would happen. And I'm like, that, I mean, obviously I left, I should say I was laid off from Viacom just months after Voltron Force started. So that gives you a time frame. The entire Neopets is still around, but Pet Pet Park was shut down in 2014. And here I am in 2022 having dinner going, hey, I liked that. And I'm like, thank you. Thank you for telling me it was worth it.
That's cool.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
The
Very
look on
cool.
your face. Yeah, the look on your face when Kennedy said that was amazing, because one of my highlights is I got to know Shannon better this VoltCon, and I got to hear the stories of what she had worked on prior with Extreme Ghostbusters and the Neopets and everything. So when I saw Kennedy say that, I looked at Shannon and just the look was priceless.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm glad for everybody that I've gotten to meet every year. And I hope the next year comes together and I get to do it again.
Yeah. We're looking forward to that because Kim and I will be back.
Hey.
So we're looking forward to that.
And that will be the what is it, the 25th anniversary of Voltron the Third Dimension?
And it'll be the 5th VoltCon, right?
Yes,
Yes.
Will be.
Yeah.
And which would make it the 40th anniversary of DOTU, because wasn't it the 35th for the first one? Or am I not counting right?
Well, that was 2019, so the 40th will be in 2024.
Okay, this is always,
Yep.
that always trips me up in the math.
Yeah.
Okay, so the 5th VoltCon, 25 years of V3D.
Yep.
Very
Time
nice.
flies.
Well, we're definitely looking forward to VoltCon 2023. There's all kinds of things to celebrate. And we may have a little bit more information from Bob about the progress on the movie.
Yep. Let's hope so.
Let's hope so.
Fingers crossed.
And I want to thank each and every one of you guys for joining me for this review of VoltCon 2022. There's a lot to cover, and I hope we covered it thoroughly.
Yeah. Shannon, thanks as always. Pete, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And thank you for capturing the videos that you're
Yes.
sharing on your YouTube channel. We will definitely provide links in the
Yes.
podcast description.
Can you tell us just verbally where people can go on YouTube to look at your videos from VoltCon 2022?
Yeah, it's youtube.com/@PeteWhite78TV.
at Pete White 78 TV.
Yep, and I've got a VoltCon playlist where the videos are all there with the interviews, the panels, and the Shake Up concert.
Cool.
Awesome. Thanks
All
again
right.
for that.
Yes, thank you very much.
Very
So
welcome.
we'll be sharing that through the website and through this video. Okay?
Yeah.
So everybody can go take a look at all those panels and the introduction by Steve and the shake-ups. So that was really cool. Thank you very much. And we'll see you all next time on
Let's Voltron.
I'll meet you at VoltCon.